So I'm down here by Humboldt Park, and I need to go home. It's almost 4 in the morning, and there's some police. And they can set up those monitors with inside the parks. You know those little boxes that have the cameras in that flash? Well, they're great to set up with inside the park to monitor with inside the park, and they can use thermal imaging, but they can also monitor animal population, truly monitor animal population, and look for people digging stuff up and dumping stuff like in the lagoon, but they had that whole alligator thing, the little small alligator that somebody dropped in the lagoon. That was an interesting story. It was kind of a warm, fuzzy story, but it was Chance the Snapper. Not Chance the Rapper, but Chance the Snapper. Yeah, that's it. But anyways, this is a beautiful area. My brother used to play semi-professional baseball at Humboldt Park, and he also used to do remodeling. Yeah, he was in carpentry, and he worked for some jobs in remodeling some places in Humboldt Park. So, and this is a very big park. And then on the other side of this, on Division Avenue, there is Roberto Clemente High School. And you think they would have a very good baseball team, right? Roberto Clemente, you would say, is probably one of the greatest all-time baseball players. And it's not without, or it's without argument. He could hit for power. He hit for average. He was an incredible outfielder, center fielder. He stole bases. He was the complete package. And highly ethical. Roberto Clemente was a very moral person, and I think very religious person. But he was the complete package, the real deal. And I cried when he died in the plane crash, and that was horrendous. And Major League Baseball was worse off. Truly. And I think the Latino people were worse off because he was a great role model that died too soon. And he would have been a great ambassador, just like Ernie Banks for the Chicago Cubs. He was a great player and a great role model, highly moral, highly ethical during his play and after. And he was an ambassador for the Cubs, and he should be an ambassador into the black community in particular. And so, and Ronnie Woo Woo, I loved him, but he needed to go to rehab he became an alcoholic. But I did love him in the bleachers and that, and he was a black guy. And I felt bad because I've been around a lot of people who became alcoholics. He needed to go into rehab. And I disagreed with the Cubs firing him. They should have never fired him, never banned him. They should have put him in rehab, truly, and got him help, at least offered to get him help. I loved Ronnie Woo Woo, and I was in the bleachers many times, and he was there, and he would be outside afterwards, but people fed him so much alcohol that he became an alcoholic. Truly, it didn't start out that way, but he would take beer as payment. Truly, liquor as payment. And he became a full-blown alcoholic, and then the team owners thought he was an embarrassment, and he was. He became just a slobbering fool. Not where he started, but where he ended, because he took payment in beer, and he got unbelievable and became a full-blown alcoholic. But they should have sent him to rehab. But again, even Ronnie Woo Woo, hardworking, good guy, he fell off the track, but again, he's a good example for black people. And so they send these ambassadors into the community that set great examples for these different groups. It's a peer-to-peer thing. It's not a racist thing. It is a peer-to-peer thing. So just like I said, Roberto Clemente would have been an incredible ambassador for the Latino community incredible if he lived. He would have been an incredible ambassador for the Latino community, and he was a great example. Go watch his highlights. I've watched Roberto Clemente's highlights as a little kid over and over, and when he died, and it could have been before I was born or after I was born, I forget exactly, but again, either way, just like Ricky Valens and the Big Bopper and those guys, they were good people and they died in the jet, just like the professional golfers who died in the jet. All those guys were good guys and would set good examples, but they died in the plane crash as well. They lost consciousness and died in the plane crash. And if the plane was going to go down a populous area, they were going to incinerate the plane. Yeah, they had fighter escorts, and if the plane was in a crash and anywhere with population, they were told to destroy the plane. But this is why I talk about in-air rescues. There has to be that ability to go from plane to save people. It's vital. So anyways, we've lost a lot of good role models, and the bad people, they stay around. Like Castro, he died of old age. He shouldn't have died of old age. But again, Hugo Chavez, same thing. They lived a long time, very bad people. Mao, Stalin, now Hitler, he lived shorter. But again, it seems like these bad people, they live a long time, and the good people, they tend to die early. And like James Gandolfini, they didn't monitor him, and he had a heart attack. And he died early. I mean, what the shit? And that's what God thinks. What the shit? So you help all the evil people, you hold them up, and they live long lives, and they're glorified. And then for good people, you destroy them, and they live horrible lives. And it's the total opposite. So it's got to change. And the good people, like the disciples in Jesus, and the good people should be living the long lives. But that's why I point out Charles Manson. He was a white guy. He didn't deserve to live the long life. But it seems like all these people live long lives, and Charles Manson didn't suffer. So, and he lived a long life. He wasn't shackled, he was thin, and he stayed in shape in prison, and he did. And he got the right people, he stayed mentally and physically and so on. And he lived a long life healthy. Yeah, it wasn't solitary, but he learned to read a lot of books, and he did, and so on and so forth. And it seemed like I watched his interviews and everything. He lived a good life. Yeah, not moving around much, but the whole point is he still read books, and he got to go out into the courtyard, and he got all these pen pals, and he got constantly interviewed on TV. Charles Manson, I forget how many interviews they had with him. But again, it seems like the good people, and I'll take myself, seems to always be at the bottom of the totem pole. Always looking up at everybody else. And the bad people are always looking down on the good people. And it should be the other way around. But because we have low standards, the bad people sit at the top and the good people sit at the bottom. If we had high standards for all these positions, then you'd have to be moral and ethical to rise. And if you weren't, you didn't rise. That's why the disciples never sat at the head of the table, because compared to Jesus, they were not worthy. So Jesus sat at the head of the table. They would never challenge Jesus. Truly, they might ask him questions, and read in the Bible, they asked him some questions, but they never challenged his authority. Ever challenged his authority. Just like the story of Mark, you'll deny me 3 times and so on. And he said, no, I won't. But Jesus said, that's fine. He wasn't challenging his authority. He said, I would never challenge your authority. So, good people wouldn't challenge the authority. Challenge the authority and be put to waste. You can ask questions, but you can't challenge the authority. But you can ask questions. Truly, that's what apologetics is. You can ask questions, but you can't challenge the authority. So every day he ate at the head of the table. No one dared challenge his authority. And that's why I like, let's see, not The Kids in the Hall, but the other with Cartman. And he takes the billy club and starts hitting him. You will respect my authority. You will respect my authority. And the people that didn't, well, they got whacked. That's the purpose of hell. That's the purpose of condemning people. People that don't respect the authority. And if they don't respect the authority, they get whacked. So even in the mob, they had made men. So all these things, like in India, the Brahmins, the high caste, in Israel, the Orthodox Jews, and there's all this informal caste system based on what? Morals and ethics. It was all based on morals and ethics. And those that had the greater morals, the greater ethics, the work ethics, the work morals, and so on, and the personal ethics and the personal morals, those people rise. Those that don't put their own limits. They put their own caps through their actions. They put their own upside potential through their actions. So the disciples understood that this is why only John died of old age. Truly. Because he was sinless. As disciples went, he was the one that had the least amount of sin. So he died of old age. The others, they didn't live as long. But anyways, you can repent and so on, and you don't have to go to it. But there's also, eventually, there has to be a fair system. So who can excel and rise to the top, and who has a cap on their potential? They can be incredible at what they do, but they can't move up vertically. But they can be great at their position and great and mentor others and be awesome, but they have an upside cap. So setting standards, and high standards win and low standards lose.